Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Nana Shimura was Deku's sister? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Izuku Midoriya had always felt alone. More than he should have, and that was saying something. The fact that he had no friends, his only friend becoming his bully once he'd been diagnosed as quirkless, didn't actually matter much to Izuku. Well, he did hate being quirkless, but holding on to his dream of one day becoming a hero like All Might made that pain a little easier to bear. No, what bothered Izuku the most was that he was an only child. It felt wrong. When Izuku asked his mother growing up why he was an only child, she would quickly change the subject or distract him with something about heroes. The more he focused on quirks and learning more about the heroes around him, the issue of the empty void in his heart was pushed to the wayside. But it never went away. Izuku shook his head. Months of hard work and training had gone into preparing himself for the UA entrance exam, and he wasn't going to waste them worrying about his long-held desire to have a sibling. He hadn't even thought about it after All Might, the greatest hero in the world, had told him those words he'd wanted to hear his whole life. You can be a hero. Now, armed with All Might's quirk, one for all, Izuku felt like he could finally fulfill his life's dreams. Well, one of them. The bus stopped smoothly. Izuku stood up from his seat, taking deep breaths to calm himself. Ever since he'd eaten All Might's hair, which he really didn't want to think about, he couldn't help but feel that gnawing emptiness in his heart once more. Again he pushed it down. Need to focus, he muttered. Need to focus. He assumed it was due to nerves. Even though he'd worked hard in his training, and studied until his brain felt like mush, Izuku was still terrified that he would fail the exam. If he failed, then he couldn't get into UA. Then All Might would consider him a failure and ask for his quirk back. Then he would go back to being weak, quirkless Deku. It didn't help that Izuku had no experience with his new quirk. Sure, All Might told him how to activate it, but Izuku had enough knowledge of quirks to know that wasn't enough. He hoped it would be enough. It had to be enough. Izuku looked up at the intimidating towers of UA High School as he stood outside the gate. Other participants passed by him, only a few giving him more than a passing glance. I have to make it, he mumbled. Get out of my way, Deku. A shiver ran down Izuku's spine. He jumped to the side. Kaken. A boy with spiky blonde hair and piercing red eyes glared at Izuku as he walked past. Katsuki Bakugo, Izuku's childhood best friend and longtime bully. Both of them were dressed in their black middle school uniforms, though Kaken had added a scarf for warmth. Not just for warmth, Izuku guessed, he assumed the extra clothing was added to help Kaken sweat more. Kaken's quirk both made him sweat a nitroglycerin-like substance and allowed him to ignite it into deadly explosions. A very powerful quirk that Kaken used to its maximum potential. But it hadn't been enough to save him from a villain. Almost a year ago, Izuku had ran straight into danger to save Kaken from being engulfed by a villain with a quirk that turned his whole body into sludge. Even today people were still whispering about the event as Kaken passed them. By running into danger to save his old friend, he'd impressed All Might. Ever since that day, Kaken had basically ignored him. Good morning. Let's do our best. Good luck, exclaimed Izuku in a nervous jumble as he frantically waved his hands in the air. Kaken walked past him without a second glance. All right then, mumbled Izuku. It was better than how Kaken would have normally treated him, but he still longed for the days when they were real friends. Back then, the hole in his heart hadn't been so bad. He shook his head. Gotta focus. He continued walking forward, past the gates and closer to his goal of becoming a hero. There was no point dwelling on the past. Now that he was armed with a quirk, he was finally given the chance to show that he had what it took to become a hero. One step, then another. The fear of his longtime bully wasn't enough to stop him from moving forward. Izuku Midoriya would pass the exam and become a hero. A pulse of energy shot through him. His foot caught on his other foot. Izuku Midoriya found himself suddenly falling flat on his face. Behind Izuku, a brown-haired girl ran forward. She extended her hand out to catch the green-haired boy, but a flash of light bursting out of his neck caught her off guard. That second of hesitation caused her to miss her chance to catch him. Izuku fell on his face and felt something heavy land on top of him. His body ached with pain, but his mind was racing as he considered what had caused him to fall. That energy, he mumbled into the ground. It must be. Izuku tried to stand up, but the heavy weight on his back made that impossible. Even with all the training he'd put his body through, he was still pretty weak. Shifting his body so he could move his neck, he stretched to try and see what was laying on top of him. It was a naked girl. Izuku's body vibrated violently as his face burned like fire. He tried to scramble out from underneath her, but she was too heavy. Although he couldn't feel anything through his clothes, his mind raced with the thought that her BRs were pressing into his back. He'd never been able to talk to a girl, let alone touch one. Unable to move, unable to think properly, Izuku Midoriya did the only thing he could do. He screamed. Nana Shimura couldn't open her eyes. She had never felt so exhausted. It was like her body refused to move. All she could do was breathe and try to sort through the mess in her head. The last thing she remembered was watching All Might transfer One for All to that crying green-haired kid. Izuku Midoriya, she remembered as the name came to the front of her mind. It was her first time going through the transference process, but the other vestiges had assured her that nothing would happen to them. How wrong they were. The last thing she remembered before she found herself stuck within One for All was fighting against All for One. That was the last time she'd been able to feel anything. Yet somehow she could feel the air on her back. Could hear panicked shouting. Could smell laundry detergent and sweat. Could taste her spit in her mouth. As she finally found the energy to open her eyes, she could see a mess of green hair. Nana hadn't thought much about the next wielder of One for All. She could see why. Toshinori had chosen him, but she would be lying to herself if she said she hadn't had her doubts. The boy was clearly too weak to handle the power, and unless Toshinori had suddenly given the boy a full lesson on how it worked during the brief transference window, it was unlikely Midoriya would be able to use it properly. Seeing him with her own eyes, something that shouldn't have been possible, but Nana was too tired to consider that fact. Nana still found him lacking. He moved his neck to look back at her, then he screamed as his eyes rolled back into his head and he fainted. Something was pressed into her back, covering her body from the curious onlookers that had started to gather. Nana looked around as best as she could. A lot of them were boys. Dude, is that girl naked? I can't believe she tripped that poor boy. I'm so jealous. The crowd pushed in toward her, varying degrees of curiosity and concern on their faces. Several of them were holding their phones. Nana was glad that someone had bothered to cover her, because she couldn't move at all. Are you all right? Exclaimed a nervous, feminine voice from behind her. Nana coughed. WMI? She tried to ask, but all that came out was a slight groan. Suddenly, her body became weightless, and she found herself floating through the air past the crowd until she was set against a pillar. It was a familiar feeling, though also strangely different. Nana's quirk had never made her feel weightless. Shaking hands pulled a brown jacket over her chest. It wasn't enough to cover her whole body, but since she was sitting down it covered enough to be decent. A round face and kind brown eyes blocked her vision as a girl kneeled in front of her. She was blushing furiously. Everything is going to be okay. The girl tried to sound confident, but her worried expression made it clear to see her true feelings. Someone went to get help. Help. Nana managed to breath out. You can talk, the girl said happily. Midoriya groaned. Nana could see the boy shake his head as he rose to his feet. The girl's eyes followed hers and she gasped. Oh shoot. Here, let me help you up. I'm fine, said Midoriya, but he didn't stop the girl from helping him. A surge of energy ran through Nana's body. A girl is touching me. A girl is talking to me. I'm talking to a girl. It wasn't her own voice in her head, but Midoriya's. As soon as it came, the pulse of power disappeared. Nana tried to stand up, but her body was just too weak. She looked down, surprised to see that her body appeared smaller. A lock of her hair fell over her eyes. Green? Midoriya turned toward her. He hurriedly bowed. Sorry for tripping you. I think she tripped you, said the girl. There was a flash of light and then poof. The girl raised her hands in the air. She appeared. He cupped his chin and muttered something to himself, his eyes glued to the floor. Occasionally Midoriya glanced at her, but he would quickly look away each time. Nana was just happy his muttering was causing the crowd to leave. Or maybe it was just because the entrance exam was about to start. Coming through. Coming through. Make way for medical staff, a robotic voice called out. 4 robots, 2 of them carrying a stretcher, rolled toward Nana. They were blocky-looking things with wheels for feet and claws for hands. Each of them had big boxy faces that displayed an extremely simplified face made of a few symbols. Stopping in front of Nana, they easily picked her up and set her on the stretcher. Then they covered her body with a blanket. One of the robots turned to Midoriya and the girl. "Are either of you in need of medical assistance?" "This boy fell on his face," said the girl. Midoriya blushed as he nervously rubbed his neck. "I'm okay. You should just focus on her." He pointed at Nana. "Do not be afraid," said the robot. "We will make you feel all better. Can you walk?" "I see can. B but I really am fine. I don't want to miss the exam," said Midoriya. "It will only take a moment. Come with us." The robot rolled behind Midoriya with surprising speed and gently pushed him toward the medical area. Nana was lifted into the air as the robots carrying her stretcher followed. The girl called after them, "Don't worry about my jacket. Feel better soon. I'll hold you both a spot." Nana found just enough strength to raise her hand and wave at the girl. She wished she could have got her name, or told the girl hers. She moved her neck to look at Midoriya, who was doing everything he could to look away from her. Somehow, she knew that he was trying to give her some privacy, while also trying not to think about the fact he'd been in contact with a naked girl. How did she know what he was thinking? "This way," said the robot, guiding Midoriya into a nearby building while she was carried further away. His eyes met hers. "Wait. You can speak with her later," said the robot. It pushed Midoriya past a set of automatic doors. As soon as the doors closed behind them, the robots carrying her picked up their pace. They sped past students and potential students alike until she found herself inside an empty building. If she had more energy, she would have started to panic, but instead Nana just let herself be carried into the unknown. The robots turned down a long hallway and then stopped at the end. The door opened. "Am I a dog? A mouse? A bear? I'm a friend." A strange animal-like creature that walked on 2 feet, had paws for hands, and had white fur stepped out of the room. There was a deep scar running down the right side of his face, crossing over his black, round eyes. Nana had seen the creature before, but not while she was alive. Only while she was stuck as a vestige inside One for All. "Nizu." The fluffy white creature smiled as his black eyes sparkled. "Yes indeed. How curious that you know of me." He paused to examine her, his eyes seeming to reach the depths of her soul. Then he stood up straight and clapped his hands together. "Well, no point waiting out here. I've called all your old friends here to piece things together, Miss Nana. Come in, come in." The robots carried her inside. It was a plain-looking room with a desk and a set of monitors on the wall. Nana could see different angles of the students entering UA through the monitors. On one of them, she could see Midoriya leaving a medical office before racing through the school. "Here, this should help you get some strength back," said Nizu as he poked a needle in her arm. Nana shot up, her hand slapping onto her arm. "Oh, what the hell? I told you it would work," he said gleefully. "And good thing too, it confirms that you're not an illusion or a ghost. But oh my, we'll have to get you some clothes before your friends get here." When she'd sat up, the blanket covering herself had fallen down. She quickly grabbed it and covered her chest as she felt her face heat up. Nizu scurried over to the desk and pulled out a set of UA gym clothes. "I'll be back once you're done changing," said Nizu as he set the clothes beside her and left the room. Once the door closed behind him, Nana stood up on wavering legs. Each of the robots looked away as the blanket fell to the floor. She quickly dressed herself, barely paying attention to the differences of her new body compared to her old one. Nana pulled the brown jacket the brown-haired girl had given her over the gym shirt. It was quite cold in the room, so the jacket helped a lot. Plus, it smelled nice. Once dressed, she took the opportunity to stretch. It felt good to move for the first time since she died. As a vestige, she'd been unable to feel anything. All she could do was watch as her former pupil was nearly killed in his fight against All for One. She had to watch him waste away as he worked tirelessly for the people. Each and every day she'd wished that she could return to the world of the living and fight for peace once more. So why now? How was she alive? Nana walked over to the monitors and watched as Izuku took his seat in a large hall full of prospective students. A few rows away from him, she could see the brown-haired girl dressed in her middle school uniform. She was shivering slightly, but Nana couldn't tell whether it was from nerves or the cold. Nana felt bad for taking her jacket. The door slammed open. Nana. Her eyes lit up as she turned toward the door. Toshinori! Toshinori! The shrunken form of All Might, Toshinori Yagi, spat out a cloud of blood as he gasped. Nana! Where did you come from? Why is your hair green? Nana had seen this form before through his eyes. Seeing it in person made it look even worse. Like a living example of her failure to defeat All for One herself. But she smiled through the pain, still happy to see her old friend and student once more. All good questions, said Nizu, poking his head out from behind Toshinori's back. But we better wait for everyone to get here before we continue. Who else did you invite? Asked Toshinori, glancing at the strange mouse-like creature that was Principal Nizu before looking back at Nana. Everyone who was her friend in her old life, said Nizu. Nana winced at the words, old life, even though she knew it was true. Toshinori blanched. Everyone. Don't sound so disappointed, said a grumpy voice. Toshinori jumped to the side. You should be happy to see your old teacher. Gran Torino, exclaimed Toshinori with another cloud of blood. Nana frowned. It made her heart ache to see her old friend in such an emaciated state. Seeing Sorahiko made her feel even worse. He was a shell of his former self. What was once an extremely fit man, the pinnacle of health, the example hero, was now a short old man with a hunched-over back and a permanent scowl. To Nana's surprise, he was still dressed in his yellow hero costume. It had looked much more impressive when he was younger. She stifled a giggle as the man's scowl deepened when he looked at her. It's just like you to ruin your own peaceful rest, said Sorahiko. How did you get here so fast? Asked Toshinori. I was in the area, he said as he stepped into the room. I like seeing the current crop of examinees and guessing which ones will make it in. There's a poor crowd this year. Once a teacher, always a teacher, said Nana. It's good to see you, both of you. Chio is busy preparing for the exam, said Nizu, taking his seat behind the desk. Once everything is done, we'll have her come and examine you. Examine me? Asked Nana. Toshinori cleared his throat. Have you seen yourself? I haven't found the time. Been too busy coming back from the dead and tripping your successor. You met young Midoriya? Asked Toshinori. I believe their connection goes deeper than that, said Nizu. He rifled through a drawer in his desk before pulling out a mirror. Here, take a look. Nana took the mirror from him. Slowly she peered inside. What stared back at her was both familiar and yet totally different. She reached up and played with the ends of her new green hair. It felt the same as her old hair, but the light bounced off her green locks differently. The rest of her body was mostly the same as it was when she was 15, though she did have a spattering of freckles on her cheeks. She looked as if she was Midoriya's sister. Until we can examine you further, I only have theories and guesses to work off of, said Nizu. But I believe your appearance speaks for itself. But how is she here? Why is she 15? Why does she look like young Midoriya? Asked Toshinori. He turned to her with sad, sunken eyes. Not that I'm not happy that you're here, Nana, but I've lived too long not to be concerned. And I'm far too curious to let those questions go unanswered, said Nizu with a grin. But there is another matter we must discuss first, what to do with Nana here. What do you mean? Asked Nana. You died, he said plainly, as if he was stating the weather. Anything you once owned has been divided amongst your friends and family. You have no place to live, and whatever family you have alive has been scattered to the wind. Nana's heart ached as she thought about her son. Had he moved on? Had he forgotten about his mother? At 15, there aren't a lot of options available to you. So what can I do? Asked Nana. Principal Nizu tapped his paws on his desk as he smiled at the gathering of heroes. Isn't it obvious? You'll just have to attend UA. Nana grimaced. I have to go to school again? Nizu chuckled. Well, you are 15. Even considering the circumstances, we can't just have you skip school. But I already know everything there is to being a hero, said Nana. To her surprise, it was Toshinori who spoke next. A lot has changed since you were a hero. She wanted to tell him that she'd seen everything through his eyes, but couldn't find the strength. Nana knew there was a difference between seeing and experiencing. Indeed, said Nizu, nodding. Your successor here has done a lot to make my job of educating the next generation harder. Toshinori spat out a cloud of blood as he gasped. What? He exclaimed. Everyone wants to either become you or surpass you, said Nizu. So we as educators are tasked with setting the proper standards. He turned toward Nana. I'm afraid what was acceptable in your day just won't cut it anymore. Nana clenched her jaw. But she didn't have a good argument, but she also didn't want to go back to school. The first time around was bad enough. At least at that time she'd had Sorahiko and Chio to help get through it. Not to change the subject so suddenly, but I have a burning question, said Toshinori. Can you still use your quirk, Nana? Her eyes widened. She hadn't even thought about using her quirk, float. Coming back from the dead had taken all of her attention. Standing up from her chair, Nana tried to flex the muscles she had once used to activate her quirk. When nothing happened at first, she tried a little harder. Still nothing. They were there, yet nothing was happening. She panicked. Trying a third time, she found herself accidentally activating One for All. The power surged through her body for a brief second before she cut it off. Something about it was wrong. Either way, she didn't rise into the air. Nana fell back into her chair, shaking her head. It feels like I should be able to, but... Can you use One for All? Asked Toshinori. Nana nodded. Yes, but it feels different. Much more powerful. I have a theory, said Nizu. I believe that the reason you're standing, well sitting, before us today is thanks to Midoriya's quirk. But Midoriya is quirkless, said Toshinori. He thinks he's quirkless, and the doctors that examined him surely thought so, but clearly something special happened today. I suspect this came about because you transferred One for All to him. Toshinori bowed his head, cupping his hand to his chin. Nana glanced over at Sorahiko, who was focused on her. There was a familiar fire of curiosity in his eyes. One that she had found great comfort in when she was in her old body. Closing her eyes, she brought those memories of her former life to the forefront of her mind. She saw herself flying through the air next to Gran Torino. Saw her wedding, the birth of her son, the day she had been forced to leave him behind, the day she found out she was quirkless. Nana stopped. That wasn't her memory. Focusing on the memory a bit harder, she could see the reflection of a crying young boy through a computer screen. It was playing a video of All Might saving a group of people, laughing madly as he carried them out of a ruined building, fire raging behind him. Can I be a hero too? A woman that looked surprisingly like herself ran forward and embraced the boy. His mother? Nana could clearly feel the woman's arms wrap around herself. I'm so sorry, Izuku. Tears welled in her eyes. Even though it was just a memory, one Nana knew wasn't hers, she couldn't help but feel an immense sadness wash over her. Those words. Why did they bring her so much pain? Nana could still remember when she'd first developed float. How excited her parents had been, how excited she had been. What do you want to be when you grow up, Nana? I want to be a hero. Oh my. That's a popular answer these days. Some things hadn't changed. Nana opened her eyes. I'll attend UA on one condition. I don't think you're in a position to make demands, said Sorahiko. She ignored him. I would like to be in the same class as Izuku Midoriya. Deep inside her heart, she felt a calling to help guide him. To help him avoid the same mistakes she'd made. Toshinori frowned. We're not sure if he'll be attending UA. He still needs to pass the entrance exam. Nana turned to Toshinori. Do you have any doubts? No, he said with a slight smirk. Neither do I, said Nana. And she didn't. There was no doubt in her mind, even if she thought he was too weak to properly use one for all, she still thought he would easily make it into UA. How can you say that? You don't even know the boy, said Sorahiko. I do, said Nana, placing her hand over her heart. Somehow. Which only lends itself to the theory that Midoriya has a latent quirk. Something that connects the two of you together, said Nizu, clapping his paws together. How fitting that one for all was born from a hidden quirk, and now it has activated another. And what is that quirk? Asked Sorahiko. Could it bring more people back from the dead? The other users, muttered Toshinori as his eyes widened. We don't know. For now, we'll monitor the boy and see if his quirk shows itself again, said Nizu. You better hope he passes the exam then, said Sorahiko. Well, we could just pass him, said Toshinori. Absolutely not, exclaimed Nizu, jumping onto his desk. Midoriya must pass through his own strength. No special treatment. And what about me? Asked Nana. You'll be taking the recommendation exam later once your body is ready, said Nizu. He looked up to the ceiling and closed his eyes. Well, where will you live? You can stay with me, said Toshinori. Bad idea, said Sorahiko, causing Toshinori to flinch. We still don't know how Nana has found herself back in our world, but if it's related to that Midoriya boy, then we should keep them together. I agree, said Nizu. Separating them may do more harm than good. I would like to stay with Izuku, said Nana. She blushed as all three heroes turned to her. It just feels right. Well, if you're sure, said Toshinori. He rubbed the back of his neck. If anything changes, just know that you can always stay with me. She stood up and gave her former successor a hug. Thank you. His whole body seemed to melt as he leaned into her embrace. We'll approach Mrs. Midoriya later and see if she agrees to house you. Now then, would you like to see how young Midoriya will do in his exam? Asked Nizu, gesturing to the monitors. And begin. Izuku and those around him stopped their stretches as they heard Present Mix's voice echo throughout the exam area. He was glad all eyes were taken off him. It wasn't his fault that the boy with the glasses was insistent on picking on him. Bakugo had been talking during the orientation too, yet he was the one called out. And now, all he'd wanted to do was wish the girl with brown hair good luck. Even if he wanted to ask her about the girl that fell on him, he wouldn't risk breaking her concentration by making her worry about that. Though he couldn't take his mind off it. It was unbelievable. A flash of light and then suddenly a naked girl falls into him? Looking around the crowd of confused students, he could see a floating pair of gym clothes. An invisible quirk. They were uncommon, but that had to be the only explanation for the naked girl. She must have had a quirk that made her invisible, and when he tripped himself he must have tripped her too. The test started. Go, go, go! The crowd rushed past him. Izuku was so deep in his thoughts that he didn't realize he'd been left behind until a few seconds had passed. Shaking his head, he ran forward into the city. There was no point letting himself be distracted by the girl or the boy with the glasses. He could worry about them after he had shown All Might that he was worthy of his power. A massive green robot crashed through a building, sending rubble flying past Izuku. One piece of rock grazed his cheek. The robot looked like some kind of scorpion with guns for claws. Clenching his fist, Izuku tried to activate One for All, but found himself unable to move. The robot inched closer, its tire dreads digging through the asphalt like it was dirt. All Might's counting on you. Izuku closed his eyes as he grit his teeth. His whole body was shaking. Were you planning on winning this fight with just that one stick? Izuku's eyes shot open. On the side of the robot, a one-pointer, he realized, there was a bright red button. His legs moved before his mind caught up to his body. In 3 leaps, he'd closed the distance. Clenching his hand into a fist, he smashed it into the button. It powered down instantly. Both of the robot's gun claws were pointed at him, locked into place. 1 point. Just in time, as a second later a sparkling laser beam shot through the robot, narrowly missing Izuku. Pardon-moi. A boy with perfectly combed blonde hair wearing a support belt for his laser quirk ran past. I was hoping for the assist, But you were faster than me. Stunned, Izuku just waved as the boy ran past. He looked down at his feet. Those words. It was thanks to them that he'd found the strength to move. They had come from a woman, somewhere deep in his memories. But he'd never heard them before. Was it one for all? No, that wasn't like All Might's quirk. There was no burst of speed or strength. Getting that point had been done through his own power. He smiled as he pumped his fist. He could do this. Or that was what he thought. He raced around the city, looking for more robots to defeat or disable, but each time he got close someone else would swoop in and take the points. One time he got within range and prepared himself to activate One for All to give him the extra boost to close the distance, but he'd hesitated too long. The robot simply rolled away to chase after another participant. He tried to keep a smile on his face as he ran after another robot, but it was getting harder and harder. How did All Might do it? How could he fight villains like that while Izuku struggled to keep positive during a simple test? Focus, he told himself, focus. If he failed, he would be too devastated to look for that brown-haired girl. To thank her for helping him and the girl that fell on him. She had green hair just like him. Izuku stopped as the ground shook underneath him. He could hear a low rumble echo through the city. At first, he wondered if it was Kaken unleashing a powerful explosion, but they had both gone to different testing sites. As much as he admired his friend Bully, he knew he wasn't so powerful as to be noticed miles away. Not yet. Which meant that it had to be. A towering monstrosity of steel and wires cast a shadow over the entire city. It moved through buildings like they weren't even there. No one tried to fight it. They ran in fear at just the sight of it. Izuku was frozen in place. It was so tall he got vertigo just looking up at it. His legs shook violently until they finally collapsed. The zero-pointer had entered the arena. Could All Might even stop that monster? Izuku turned and crawled away. He had no intention of fighting that thing when he only had 1 point to his name. 1 point wouldn't be enough to get him into UA. But as he looked around, he noticed all the nearby robots had already been destroyed. How much time did he have left? 1 point. 1 point, muttered Izuku. He decided now was the time to use One for All. If he was even half as fast as All Might using it, then he could zip around the city looking for robots to destroy with ease. As he searched his memory for the instructions All Might gave him on how to activate the quirk, he found a different memory. One that he was sure he had never seen before. A yellow glove pushed All Might away as a man with a yellow cape grabbed him and quickly fled into the city. The memory was blurry, as if seen through teary eyes. All Might looked young, younger than Izuku had ever seen him before. Footage he'd seen? No, it was real. But how? Become a symbol. It was a woman's voice. He'd heard it before, but this time it was dripping in exhaustion and agony. Izuku felt hands grip his neck. A girl's voice cried out in pain. Izuku was knocked from the memory as he saw the brown-haired girl from before covered in rubble. She was bleeding, unable to push the heavy concrete off her. He stumbled toward her, then looked up to see the zero-pointer's hand reaching toward the girl. There wouldn't be enough time to save her. It's your turn. Izuku jumped. The bones in his legs shattered as the wind rushed past his face. He threw his arm back. It pulsed with energy, running red-hot like it was on fire. His whole body felt like it was burning. Twisting in the air, he dodged the zero-pointer's arm as it tried to stop him. One shot. One chance to take it down. One chance to save that kind girl. Smash! With that single punch, two things were destroyed. The zero-pointer crumbled like paper, small explosions ringing out over its body as it fell to the ground. A plume of dust shot into the air. Izuku looked down at his arm. It was completely destroyed. He couldn't feel anything. All he could do was stare at the limp, tattered mess before the dust obscured his vision. Then gravity caught up with him, and he fell back down to earth. He knew he had failed the exam. With only 1 point to his name, there was no way he could make it into UA. Since his arm and legs were destroyed, there was no way he could find any more robots to destroy. But at least he'd punched the zero-pointer away from that girl. She would be safe. Just before he reached the ground, a hand smacked his face. It surprisingly hurt him more than breaking 3 of his limbs, but he chalked that up to destroying his pain. receptors in his arms and legs before they could tell his brain just how much pain he should be in. For a brief second he floated in the air, then he was slowly lowered to the ground. He glanced at the girl, who was holding her fingertips together with a pained look on her face. "Release," she said as he touched down on the ground. As gravity returned to his body, he felt his shattered bones sink to the bottom of his lifeless limbs. Tears welled in his eyes, but they weren't from the pain. He'd failed. All those months of training, all of them for nothing as he couldn't contain the power of All Might's quirk. 1 point. That was all he was good for. Just one measly point. "I'm sorry, All Might." A buzzer blared as the test ended. People gathered around him, murmuring about his quirk and the damage he'd done to the 0-pointer. Their words suffocated him. He looked up at the brown-haired girl. She was staring at him with pity. It was a look Izuku was well acquainted with. But she appeared to be okay. With tears streaming down his face, he gave her the best smile he could muster. "I'm glad. I'm glad you're okay." Nana stared at the screen. That power that was one for all? Her hands were shaking, sweat running down her face. Midoriya was sitting in a pool of his own blood as Chio walked around using her quirk on the injured. As she kissed Midoriya on the head, his arms and legs snapped back into place. Then Nizu turned off the monitor. Nana looked over at her friends, expecting them to be just as stunned as she was. Instead, Toshinori was jumping for joy. He did it. Sorahiko smacked Toshinori on the back of the head, causing the skeletal blonde man to spit out a river of blood. "Idiot! You didn't teach him at all, did you?" "I had less than a year to get him from 0 to hero," said Toshinori, rubbing his neck. "Honestly, I'm just glad he didn't explode." "Explode? Indeed," said Nizu. "It will take a lot of work to get him to your level, but I see the potential." "I see a potential idiot who'd kill himself trying to save a puppy," said Sorahiko, shaking his head. What was that?" asked Nana, speaking barely above a whisper. Toshinori raised his brow as he turned to her. "What do you mean?" "That was one for all." "That?" she yelled. "That was nothing like one for all. When have any of us blown up our limbs throwing a simple punch? And that power." As a vestige, she'd watched Toshinori fighting as All Might. She knew what he could do, what the limits of his strength were. Knew how it had waned as he worked himself to dust. Midoriya's punch hadn't been as strong as Toshinori. He lacked the natural talent and technique that made her pupil into the symbol of peace. Yet, he had still unleashed an immense amount of power. With proper training. "The power I've honed since the day I watched you. Since the day I last saw you, that power is his now." Toshinori bent down to look into her eyes. "Nana, can you help me guide him?" Nana couldn't speak. Honestly, the power Midoriya showed scared her. If her current body even possessed half as much power, even without float there was a lot that power could do. In the past, all One for All had done for her was make her faster in the air. Sure, it helped with her strength, but not to the point she could level a building with a wild swing. The image of his broken body was fresh in her eyes. "I'll do what I can," she said weakly. Toshinori smiled as he patted her shoulder. "That's all I can ask for." Nana felt her strength leave her. She collapsed into a chair, the room spinning around her. Nizu immediately ran forward to check her pulse, then he checked her temperature. The others watched her with worried expressions. She hated making her friends worry, but she couldn't find it in herself to smile, couldn't let them know everything would be okay. It took everything in her just to stay awake. "The injection I gave her ran out," said Nizu. He grabbed the blanket left behind on the floor and wrapped it around her. "She just needs to sleep." "I better return home," said Sorahiko. "Call me if Midoriya won't house her." "Thank you for coming," said Toshinori. He sat down next to Nana and breathed a sigh of relief as their mutual friend left. "Scary," he muttered. "Well, I better call Mrs. Midoriya and let her know her son will be staying a few hours while he recovers," said Nizu. How to bring up Nana? It wasn't the first time he'd woken up since they'd brought him to the medical wing. Ever since Recovery Girl had kissed him and they'd brought him in, he'd been fading in and out of consciousness. A byproduct of her quirk. Something Izuku had researched extensively and documented thoroughly. Something that didn't matter because he would never be a hero. Even if he aced the written portion of the test, there was no way 1 point in the practical would be enough. Izuku sighed. He closed his eyes and waited to fall asleep again. It was the only respite from his troubled thoughts. But he stayed awake. The faint ticking of a clock hanging from the wall was the only sound in the room, besides his own faint sobbing as he felt tears slide down his face. Heroes didn't cry. Kaken had beat that lesson into him. But he would never be a hero, so he let himself cry as much as he could. The door opened. He opened his eyes and sat up slightly. He saw 2 robots disappear behind a curtain as they set someone in the bed next to him. Each bed was separated by a light green curtain, so he couldn't see who it was. Then Recovery Girl walked around the curtain to his side. Several of her gray hairs were out of place, and she had a pensive look on her face. So much trouble. She looked up at him and forced a smile onto her wrinkled face. How are you doing, dear? Izuku wiped the tears from his face. I'm much better. Thank you. He rubbed his arm. Sorry for the trouble I caused. She hummed softly. It really wasn't your fault. I don't think Toshinori knew that would happen when he gave you one for all. Her smile faltered. I hope he didn't know. Izuku gasped. Why you know? I've been helping people with that quirk my whole life, she said with a nostalgic sigh. Recovery Girl moved closer to check on his arm. And it seems I'll continue to help them until the day I die. She glanced at the curtain. Should we be talking about this so loud? Whispered Izuku. She knows. More than you do, said Recovery Girl. When she wakes up I'll introduce you two properly. She. The girl who came out of your neck. She knows? Asked Izuku, much louder than he intended. Wait, my neck? She came out of my neck? How? Before Recovery Girl could answer him, Izuku muttered under his breath, could she have been a part of One for All? I've never heard of people being trapped inside quirks, but anything is possible. And it is a power passed down from person to person. Maybe it was her quirk that trapped her inside. What would it be like to be trapped inside a quirk? No, maybe she is One for All. A physical representation of the power. But why did she pop out now? Could she be all mights? Are combined? Love child? Enough, said Recovery Girl sternly. I don't think I heard you take a single breath. You're meant to be recovering. He hung his head. Sorry. You'll have plenty of time to ask her all those questions later once you're both recovered. After all, she will be living with you. He blinked. Huh. Izuku fainted once more. But Izuku doesn't have a quirk, said Inko Midoriya. She had nearly dropped the phone and fainted when she had heard that Izuku had been injured so badly that he needed extra care. Then she forced herself to sit down when they described his injuries. Now they were saying he'd created a person with his quirk? The quirk that her son definitely didn't have. Are you sure you're calling the right house? I'm quite sure, said the energetic voice on the phone. The principal of UA High School, Nizu, to Inko's surprise. Already her son was being noticed. About time, she thought. We suspect that his quirk lay dormant until this very morning. But how can a quirk create a whole person? Asked Inko. She didn't know much about quirks. Whenever Izuku tried to talk to her about them, it made her head spin. Well, we don't think it created a whole person. Nizu paused. But there have been evidence of quirks that are sentient. We had a potential student this morning who could summon his own shadow to fight for him. And that shadow seemed to possess a mind of its own. Until we run some more tests, our running theory is that your son possesses a similar quirk. Hence the appearance of young Nana. So what? My son has a daughter now. No. More like a sister. They're the same age. Again, we need to run more tests. But Nana also needs a place to stay. Which is why you're calling me, said Inko. She sighed. Nana. When she was PR Jin and T with Izuku, the initial tests had shown her as PR Jin and T with twins. By the next Alters ND, it was just Izuku. It had been a complicated birth, one that made her unable to have any more kids. Although she couldn't prove it, she suspected that was why Hisashi took the job overseas. Izuku had always wanted a sibling. Well, I can't leave the poor girl to fend for herself, said Inko. UA is willing to help pay for her room and board, said Nizu. We understand how complicated quirks can be and want to ease the pain of taking another person into a single-parent household. I can't accept that, Inko said as a light heat lit up her cheeks. She decided to ignore the single-parent comment. We insist. Consider it an apology for letting your son get so injured as well. Inko frowned. He better be the one apologizing. And I bet he will. Either way, thank you for accepting Nana into your home. We will bring her by tomorrow after she takes her entrance exam. Before you go, Inko took a deep breath. She played with her skirt nervously. Izuku, did he pass? There was a long pause on the other end. Your son will receive a letter in the mail in 1 week's time. Have faith in your son, and don't let him lose hope. Thank you and have a wonderful plus ultra day. It surprised Nana how little she thought about Kotaro when she was a vestige inside One for All. Now that she was back in the real world, she could go see him again. But could she face him? Would she face him? Would her son even want to see her? Nana didn't want to find out. She was a coward. Always had been. The only good things she'd done were having her son and inspiring the #1 hero. Chio pulled back the curtain and stepped up to her bed. How much do you want the boy to know? Nana rolled over onto her side. I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad you're back, said Chio, brushing Nana's green locks out of her eyes. But I need you to focus. How old was Kotaro now? Did he think about his mother anymore? Did he know she had died fighting for a peaceful world for him? Fighting that monster. If All for One got his hands on One for All, with the power that it held now, he would be unstoppable. Tashinori took him out, but evil tended to linger. Until she buried that vile monster herself, she needed to prepare for his return. Izuku Midoriya was the most important boy in the world. He needed to be protected. To be trained. So why could she only think about her son? Nana rolled over. I'll tell the boy everything he needs to know. Is there anything you don't want him to know? Just like last time, we leave my family out of this, said Nana. Chio sighed. All right. Chio, how am I back here? Nizu thinks Midoriya has a quirk, but why me? I don't know. Chio sat down on her bed. You tell me. Where did you go? When I died, I found myself in a dark void with 6 other figures. Nana sat up. The previous wielders of One for All. They told me their spirits, or whatever makes a human, were also passed on as each user passed the torch to the next. I saw the world through Tashinori's eyes. That must have been exciting. Nana smiled. It was. Her smile faltered. Times. I'm happy to see that he achieved his dream. At the cost of so much, said Chio sadly. Such is the life of a hero. Their eyes met. You've been given a second chance, Nana, said Chio. She reached over and patted her friend's hand. So why are you so glum? What happened to the girl who kept a smile on her face during the worst of times? She's found herself in a world that's moved past her. Nana looked down at her hand. The overwhelming power of One for All tingled below the surface of her skin. Burdened once again with too much strength and exhausting responsibility. Excuse me, called a voice from behind the curtain. Recovery girl? Chio hopped off the bed. Coming, dear. She turned back to point her cane at Nana. When I come around with the boy, I better see you smiling. Nana giggled. You got it, recovery girl. Izuku bowed. I'm sorry I caused you to be born from my neck. The girl sitting up in the bed laughed as recovery girl smacked him in the back of her head with his cane. Introduce yourself first. Sorry, he said, rubbing where she hit him. He cleared his throat, forcing himself to look into the girl's eyes. It was like looking at his mother, only much younger. My name is Izuku Midoriya. The girl held out her hand. Nana, it's a pleasure to meet you. Her hands were impossibly soft, yet her grip was firm. If she didn't look like she could be his sister, he would be freaking out at just touching her. Izuku had next to no experience with girls. Recovery girl cleared her throat. Once Nana recovers and finishes her exam, she'll be moving in with you. Oh, you'll be going to UA? He asked. If I pass. Hopefully we'll be in the same class. Izuku frowned. I wouldn't count on that. She arched her brow. But supposedly we're connected. You think they'd separate us? Well, he glanced at Recovery Girl. I don't think I passed the exam. Recovery Girl and Nana shared a quick look. I see, said Nana. They told you that you failed? No, but... So then how do you know? She asked. Because I only got 1 point, said Izuku. Even if I aced the written portion, I don't think it will be enough to pass. Do you really think a hero school would deny a student who saves others with a smile on his face? She asked, tilting her head to the side. Huh. Nana shook her head. Never mind. Just don't give up so easily. Wait until you get your results at least. What was the point of hoping when he knew what the outcome would be? So what if he helped out that brown-haired girl by taking down the 0-pointer? As he was laying in the medical office bed, he'd come to the conclusion that UA would have never allowed her to be killed during a school exam. The only person that really got hurt was himself, and that was his own fault. Somewhere deep inside, there was a little boy who wanted more than anything to be a hero. If it made that little boy smile, then he would continue to hold on for just a moment longer. The recommendation exam was a lot harder than Nana was expecting. She wondered at first if Nizu had just given her an easy test so he could accept her without any fuss, until she reached the end of the exam. The early portion had been focused on moral questions about being a hero. Which hostages were more important? Should you kill villains? Things like that. The end of the test was focused on the history of heroes. Which of course mostly had to do with All Might. Having seen his whole hero career through his eyes, Nana was sure she wouldn't struggle with those questions. But she did. They were less concerned with what All Might did, and how his actions influenced the world around him. Toshinori never stopped and considered what he was doing, he just kept moving forward. Back when she was a hero, Nana had adopted a similar attitude. Although she had lacked the power to continue saving people day after day without breaks. After making her way through the written portion, Nana had to demonstrate her quirk in a short practical section. To say that she was afraid to use One for All after watching Midoriya shatter his bones was an understatement. She was terrified. But whereas he was using it for the first time under emotional distress, Nana had her chance to test out her power in a calm, controlled environment. Which helped a lot with getting over the mental barrier she hadn't realized her brain was already constructing. Nana powered up to full power just to see if that would destroy her body like Midoriya. Was that foolish? She knew it was, but it was something she had to know. Thankfully, as long as she didn't move it seemed to be fine. Her blood boiled, her eyes watered, and it felt like she was going to explode, but all it did was drain her stamina until she had to quickly shut it off. Unfortunately, she didn't know what to do to show off One for All without hurting herself. It had been much weaker during her time, so she hadn't had to worry about using its full strength. Her body had regressed to the musculature she'd had at 15. It was more than Midoriya's by a lot, but still nowhere near where it had to be to make it usable. So she failed the practical, much like Midoriya. Well, she completed the example course for the practical exam without using her quirk, but she knew that wouldn't be enough. Her only saving grace would be Toshinori stepping in and ensuring she passed anyway. He was the reason she was taking the recommendation exam in the first place and not the regular test. At least his word carried a lot of weight. Nizu and Nana sat in his office after the exam as the mouse, bear, thing poured her a cup of tea. You really can't use float at all? He asked. Nana sipped her tea. No. I can feel that it's there, but something is blocking it. Do you think it's a mental block or a physical block? She tapped her finger on her teacup. Both? Like, back in my old body I could activate float in my sleep, and have several times. But here, every time I try to use it, either nothing happens or One for All charges up. I wonder what would happen if young Midoriya tried to activate your quirk, said Nizu. Her eyes widened. You think he could? No, but isn't the possibility exciting? Nizu laughed. From what you're saying, it seems float has been either replaced or absorbed into One for All. And of course you aren't the only wielder of that wondrous power. A power that neither of us can use, she said sadly. Yes, but you'll get there in time. Both of you just need strength training. She looked down at her hand. In the blink of an eye she could see Midoriya's mangled fingers, blood dripping onto the asphalt below him, then it was replaced with her old body. The scars of countless fights riddling her skin. When she blinked, it was back to her new, unblemished fingers. I feel like I'm missing something. Which is why I insisted you attend UA with Midoriya, assuming you pass of course, said Nizu. He took another sip of his tea. I don't mean to brag, but we are quite good at bringing out the full potential of our students. And you have great potential. I was a minor hero, she said, swirling her remaining tea around in her cup. Who inspired All Might, said Nizu. He poured himself another cup. Who wields his same quirk and who came back from the dead. I can honestly say I've never had a student that intrigues me half as much as you. And who abandoned her son, her family, she thought to herself. Nana knew in this life she'd have to leave them alone again, but it still hurt. She felt like a failure, like it would have been better if one of the other vestiges came back instead of her. At least their families were all long gone, as if that made things better, but it would have for Nana. Just the knowledge that her family might still be out there felt like a dagger to her heart. Even if they wouldn't accept her in her new body, she still wanted to see her son again. Izuku, did you finish vacuuming the guest room? Inko called out for her son as she finished dinner. It had been a day since her son returned from UA. He seemed distracted, to put it lightly. He was clearly upset at his performance during the entrance exam, but no matter how hard Inko tried to pry what happened out of him, he would change the subject or leave the room. How could she support him if he wasn't going to talk to her? Not yet, I'm dusting the curtains, Izuku called back. It had been a year since anyone had used their guest room. Well, they called it a guest room, but it was actually Hisashi's bedroom. They hadn't slept in the same bedroom since Izuku was 3. A year ago, that was the last time she'd seen her husband. The pain of their fractured relationship had softened over the years, especially with Mitsuki's help, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. Hisashi hadn't even been the last person to use the guest room. He hadn't been back home since Izuku was 9. All he bothered to do was call for a video chat on his birthday. Inko triple-checked everything on the stove before making her way to the guest room. Just as her son had said, he was running a duster over the curtains. He had a pensive look on his face, and his movements were stiff. Which, considering he'd destroyed both of his legs and his arm, was to be expected. She'd nearly died of shock when the school called her and explained what happened. But a mother's job was never done, so she'd picked herself right back up and got to work preparing things for her new house guest. Izuku, she said, causing the boy to flinch. What's Nana like? He rubbed the back of his head. I'm not sure. I only talked to her for a bit, but she seems nice. Pulling on a strand of his hair, he said, and she has green hair. So as she'll fit right in. I'm sure she will, said Inko, smiling. Did you make any other friends? Izuku laughed nervously. Well, get out of my way, Deku. As much as Izuku didn't want to admit it to himself, Kaken hadn't been his friend for a long time. You can talk. Oh shoot. Here, let me help you up. That brown-haired girl was so kind and cute his heart was racing at just the thought of her. If this is some sort of game to you, then please leave immediately. Izuku shivered. The guy with the glasses was so stern. Not only had he called him out in front of everyone, but he'd done it twice. Even though he knew it hadn't actually affected his performance in the test, Izuku couldn't help but wonder how much better he would have done if he wasn't thrown off right at the start. At least the guy with the laser quirk had been nice. I met a few nice people, said Izuku. Soon you'll be making all sorts of new friends, said Inko. She noticed her son's sad sigh but decided to ignore it. Her son had always struggled making friends. Even the friends he did have were fairly rough with him. She'd complained to Mitsuki many times about how rough her son was with Izuku, but it only fixed things for about a week. Then Izuku would come back with another scorched uniform. But now that he had a quirk and was going to a new school, things would be different. Inko hoped so. She hummed to herself as she straightened out the sheets. It was going to be nice having another girl in the house. Izuku was a good kid, but his obsession with heroes was overwhelming at times. Of course, she knew that girls could be obsessed with heroes too, but she could hope that Nana would be more restrained. even if she had supposedly manifested from Izuku's quirk. What kind of quirk appeared at 15 and then blew up a person's arms and legs and created an entire human being? Of all the kids to have that quirk, of course it would be her son. Just her luck. So, do you have any thoughts on how your quirk works? Asked Inko. She knew that would be the best way to draw her son out of his funk. And she was right. His eyes lit up. I've been thinking about it non-stop. He started speaking so fast Inko could barely understand him. Nana appears to be totally independent with no need to reconvene with my body to keep her form, unlike other sentient quirks which have to return to the user after some time. Though the time limit could just be longer. Either way, there doesn't seem to be a limit to the distance we can be apart from each other, nor a physical strain from having her separated from me. Then there's the mental link. You two can share thoughts? Asked Inko. He shuffled nervously. Not exactly, but it seems like I keep having memories that I know I've never had. Like, do I have a cousin named Kotaro? He'd be a little boy with black hair. No, your father and I don't have any siblings, said Inko. I didn't have a friend named Kotaro, did I? If you did, you'd know better than I would. But no, I don't think so. Do you think it's connected to Nana? She asked. It has to be, he said as he set up the vacuum. But she appeared just yesterday, and has been at the school the whole time. How could she know a little boy? I don't know, said Izuku. He looked up and smiled at her. But I'm excited to find out. Nana's fist hovered over the door. She was angry at herself for feeling so nervous. She was a pro-hero for goodness sake. Was a pro-hero. Once again she tried to activate float. Nothing. On the drive over, Nizu had given his theory for why she was unable to use float. I'm sure you've heard of quirkless mothers lifting cars to save their babies? They can do that because in times of great stress humans can surpass their body's natural limits. Basically, all our bodies have limiters put in to keep us from damaging ourselves. I suspect your body has locked float away until you're strong enough to handle the increased power of One for All. And what if you're wrong? Asked Nana, watching the buildings race past them as they drove through the city. What if this body is incapable of flight? That is a possibility. Since your body was formed from Midoriya's and he doesn't possess float, then you might never be able to activate your quirk. But I believe that you will someday be able to fly again. After all, you've said yourself that you can still feel the muscles you use to activate float. Could be like phantom pain. Perhaps, said Nizu. Or perhaps your connection with Midoriya will allow him to fly as well. There are so many wonderful possibilities. Nana didn't think they were so wonderful. Taking a deep breath, she knocked on the door. Whatever happened with her quirk, she knew the task ahead of her. All she had to do was train Midoriya and help guide him into being the best wielder of One for All he could be. Her own thoughts and problems didn't matter. Just like last time, things were bigger than herself. A short, slightly overweight woman opened the door with a wide smile on her face. She wore a pink sweater with a white shirt underneath over a blue pencil skirt. The woman styled her green hair very similar to Nana's. Had she had green hair in her old life, the two could have been sisters. At the very least, they appeared to be related. Bowing, Nana said, "My name is Nana. Thank you for welcoming me into your home." "Please, come in," said the woman, stepping to the side. "My name is Inko Midoriya, but you can call me Inko or any variation of mother if you'd like." Principal Nizu said you and Izuku are practically siblings as far as he's concerned. Nana returned Inko's smile. She wasn't quite ready to think of this woman as her mother, nor as Midoriya as her brother, but she didn't feel the need to clarify that at that moment. As she stepped inside and took a look around, she noted that it wasn't too dissimilar to places she'd stayed in back in her old life. A quaint, homely little apartment for 3, now 4. "Is Mr. Midoriya and your son home?" asked Nana. Inko winced. "My husband works overseas, so you won't see him often." Her expression lightened. "But Izuku is putting the finishing touches on your room. Would you like to see it now or after dinner?" "Now please, thank you," said Nana. "Feel free to decorate it however you like," said Inko as she led them to the hallway. Nana noted all the pictures of Izuku displayed around the house. Only one displayed an older man that must have been his father. Just please don't fill the walls with hero merchandise. I'm guessing Midoriya is a fan of heroes? Asked Nana. She'd seen a bit of the boy's obsession with heroes through Toshinori's eyes. If that was how he was in public. He's a fan all right, said Inko in a monotone voice. She stopped at a door near the end of the hall. The door across from it had an All Might nameplate that displayed Izuku on it. Since Nana wasn't that popular of a hero, she hadn't had many sponsors or companies make hero merchandise for her. The most she ever had was a wall scroll with a small print run. Toshinori had one displayed in his office at my tower. For Christmas, she'd given Sorahiko one, but she had no idea what he'd done with it. Probably thrown it away, knowing him. Izuku, said Inko, knocking on the door. Nana is here. Nana heard a yelp on the other side before the door flew open. Midoriya's face was bright red with sweat running down it like rivers. His eyes met hers for a brief second before quickly turning away. He hurriedly bowed. Welcome, he practically yelled. Indoor voice, Izuku, said Inko. Alright, sorry, said Midoriya. He straightened up and turned as he gestured inside the room. We got everything ready for YU. The room was plain. It had light gray walls and a single window facing out into the city. There was a bed with pink sheets set under the window with a dresser and small desk on either side. On top of the desk was a vase filled with flowers. Nana only recognized roses and daisies, but they were all beautiful. She stepped closer and sniffed them, enjoying the floral scent. I hope you like them, said Inko, nervously wringing her hands. I love them, said Nana. Thank you. Inko stood up a little straighter, beaming with pride. Feel free to make any changes to the room. If you need help moving furniture, Izuku will help you. I'd be happy to, said Izuku, smiling as brightly as his mother. Nana wondered how much to tell him about her past. If he had access to her memories like she had some access to his, then not telling him would just lead to confusion. But she also didn't want to overload the boy. Her eyes trailed over to Inko. Then there was the matter of the boy's mother. Did she know about One for All? How would she react to a grown woman hiding in the body of a 15-year-old staying in her house? Why don't we get started on dinner? I hope you like katsudon, said Inko as she walked away. Izuku cheered as he bounded down the hall after his mother. Nana liked her lips. She hadn't ever enjoyed it in her old life, tending to enjoy more American dishes. But now her stomach growled and she found herself racing down the hall to get herself a bowl. The first bite made her cry. It was so good. She had no idea why the two Midoriyas were crying tears of joy as well. This is all you have for weights? Nana examined the meager amount of weights Izuku had with a frown on her face. While they were eating dinner, Nana had dodged any questions about herself, saying she was too tired. But she had told Izuku she would help him with his training the next morning. All Might wasn't the only one who had contributed their strength to One for All. She'd given it a pretty fair amount on her one. So she knew her way around the gym. 3 dumbbells was not a gym. Most of the weightlifting I've been doing has been picking up trash on the beach, he said, averting his gaze. Look at me when I'm talking to you, she said sternly. He jumped. Yes, ma'am. Nana shook her head. Picking up trash isn't going to be enough to prepare your body for one. Izuku shushed her. Not so loud. He gestured to the kitchen where Inko was cleaning up from breakfast. She doesn't know. Are you going to keep it from her? Asked Nana. Not forever, Izuku muttered. I don't want to worry her. I can see that, said Nana. But my point stands. You reached the starting line, but you need to work harder if you want to move past it. I'm not even sure I've reached the starting line, said Izuku. That would be getting into UA. I'm sure they'll accept you, said Nana. She picked up one of the weights and tested it. Have some faith in yourself. All Might chose you, right? Yeah, said Izuku. Hey Nana? What's your quirk? What makes you think I have one? She asked, hiding her smile. I just assumed, but I guess if you came from me that means. Nana laughed. Yes, I have a quirk. I have One for All too. Whoa, he exclaimed. Does that mean you could give it to another person? What would happen if I gave my One for All to you? Would you explode? If you gave it up, would I lose it as well? Have you used it before? I don't see any injuries on your arms, so it seems like you haven't, but maybe you're just better at it than me. Nana let him continue to mumble for several minutes before she clapped her hands. Enough. The only question I can answer is that I have used One for All before, but only activating it. I haven't used it in combat like you have. It was a half-truth. She had used it in combat, but she'd never blown up her arms and legs. How do you activate it? He asked. She felt a heat rise up to her cheeks. Well, clench your butt and yell smash? I don't yell smash, said Nana. That's Tosh All Might's thing. But, you do have to clench your butt. So the power is focused in my glutes? Said Izuku so seriously it made Nana burst out laughing. No. She struggled to get down to a reasonable volume so Inko wouldn't hear her say, One for All can power any part of the body. It's only focused where you want to focus it. When I used it, I wasn't thinking about where to focus it, said Izuku, staring at his hands. That's because it was your first time using it. Your body acted on instinct. We'll work on building up some control while we work on getting you fit. Thanks, Nana, said Izuku. I'm glad I have someone to talk to about this. He glanced at his phone. All Might still hasn't texted you back? At the end of dinner, Izuku texted Toshinori about the entrance exam. Her former pupil had replied with a short text that said he would talk to the both of them later. When Izuku texted back asking when later was, there was no response. Nana had no doubt that Toshinori had just gotten distracted saving someone. It was a major problem of his. Well, there's nothing you can do about that, said Nana. Go get some gym clothes on. We're going for a run. But I already ran today, said Izuku. She shot him a terrifying glare. Not to my standard. Now move. All Might emptied his pockets onto a side table as he shuffled over to his couch. So many acceptance videos. He'd agreed on the condition that he could record young Midoriya's, but he hadn't considered just how long each other video was going to take. All of his muscles ached. It was getting harder and harder to hold his muscle form. How the hell was he going to teach? But he wasn't done. He had one last task he had to do before he could rest. At least he didn't need to hold his muscle form for this one. His hands shook as he scrolled through his contacts. There were two people that knew about One for All that he hadn't talked to about young Midoriya. All Might had never planned to tell Naomasa, because Naomasa had never questioned him about picking a successor. Which left the last person Sir Knight. The phone rang for a few seconds before a stern voice answered, I expected you to call me sooner, All Might. Sorry, Sir Knight, said All Might. I didn't want to say anything until I was certain. So you've chosen your successor? Maybe I just wanted to call and see how you were doing? The phone was silent for a few seconds before there was a long sigh. 10 months ago I approached you with my recommendation for the next wielder of One for All, Mirio Togata. You agreed to meet with him, and then ignored all of my calls and texts after you didn't attend the meeting. Then yesterday, I received a call from Nizu asking me to come to UA High School. He refused to say why over the phone. And now you're calling me out of nowhere? Don't take me for a fool. Sorry. All Might loosened his tie. Yes, I've chosen my successor. I should have called and told you sooner, but I was distracted. Training them? Yes, said All Might. I see. More silence. I hope you didn't make a mistake. Now that I've seen them in action, I'm sure I didn't. But that's not the only reason I called you. Oh. All Might cleared his throat. The boy I chose had a hidden quirk. There isn't an easy way to say this, so I'll just come out and say it. It brought back Nana. Your old master? How? Asked Knight. We aren't sure. Nizu and Recovery Girl are running some tests on the blood samples we gathered from them. She seems to be the same as she was before she left, but her body has regressed in age. And she appears to still be able to use One for All, though I have yet to see her use it. Night Eye groaned. So now there are 3 of you running around, and not a single one is Lemillion. Do you know what he could do if he had your quirk? No, you don't, because you never gave him a chance. And I'm sorry for that. Why are you telling me all this? Because you're my friend, Mirai. All Might stood up and walked through his apartment to his bedroom. If something were to happen to me, I would watch over them, said Knight. But in exchange I want you to autograph my limited edition Silver Age comic het manga. All Might groaned. It was bad enough having a fan as a successor. No matter where he went he wasn't able to get away from his fans. I'll talk to my agent. And I want you to take care of yourself, said Night Eye with a hint of sadness. My vision hasn't changed. I will. Good night, Mirai. Good night, Toshinori. He was in hell. Every one of his muscles was in agonizing, intense pain. All Might's training had been rough, but Izuku had been confident his idol's training would be enough to get him ready for the entrance exam. Nana's training was trying to kill him. All his life he'd wished for a quirk and a sibling. The monkey's paw had certainly curled for him. Izuku grunted as a water bottle hit his stomach. Small sips, said Nana. If you drink too fast you'll throw up. It was his third day of suffering. Still no answer from All Might, and still no word from Yue. He wondered if they would even bother to tell him he wasn't accepted. The last time his mom was looking for a job he remembered her complaining about the wait to find out whether she got the job or not. Some jobs would let her know that they were going with another person, and others just gave her the cold shoulder. He slowly sipped his water. When Izuku took another sip. When are we going to work on my control? We can't do that properly without recovery girl, said Nana, taking sips of her own water bottle. I'm not going to risk you blowing up again without a proper plan. Izuku looked down at his arms. Ever since that first morning with Nana, he'd been thinking about her control over One for All. While she had yet to demonstrate it to him, he somehow trusted that everything she was saying was true. Like she had used it before to some amount of success. Though he couldn't figure out why he thought that, as he knew she had suddenly appeared out of nowhere on the day of the exam. His leading theory was that she was a hidden part of his subconscious made physical. Which meant that she was a part of him, which meant that he was capable of greater control too. Which gave him the courage to try on his own. In the dead of night, Izuku stood in the middle of his bedroom in his gym clothes. Maybe it was stupid, but he knew he had to gain control of One for All as soon as possible. Even to the risk of his own life. To help push him even further beyond, he would even risk his limited edition All Might merch. She made it sound like something she could turn on and off, muttered Izuku. All Might has his muscle form and his real form, so he probably uses One for All to boost himself up, which means that he doesn't use it all the time. Does Nana have a muscle form? He shook his head. No, she's muscular all the time. Flexing his arms, he readied himself. I'll imagine it like a light switch. Without focusing on a specific part of my body, I'll turn it on and then off quickly. Clenching his butt, Izuku activated One for All. Instantly he felt his whole body flash with pain. His ears rang as his blood boiled. Tears welled in his eyes before they evaporated instantly. A gust of wind kicked up in his room, throwing it into disarray. Just as soon as it started, he turned it off and fell to the floor. A minute passed. He laid there with his face pressed against his cool floor. The tears that streamed down his cheek cooled his body. Finally, he forced himself into a sitting pose as he leaned against his bed. Izuku looked down at his arms. They were glowing red like he'd been out in the sun too long, but otherwise they were uninjured. Definitely still sore. Maybe some light bruising. My body can't handle that much power, he murmured. Even with Nana's training, I won't be able to reach All Might's physique before school starts. That goal was impossible. If All Might couldn't get him to that level before the entrance exam, then no one could. Muscles grow stronger by tearing them and allowing them to heal, but if you tear them too much then they can't heal well enough on their own. Izuku couldn't stand, so he crawled over to his desk and grabbed his notebook. He scribbled down the results of his test. I need to find a way to practice using One for All without hurting myself too badly. He fell asleep in the middle of writing. The next morning started normally. He got up early and met Nana outside their apartment to start their run. Instantly he could tell his body was still reeling from the effect of just activating One for All. Nana seemed to notice it as well. She stopped them near a park and forced Izuku to sit down on a nearby bench. What did you do? She asked, crossing her arms under her chest. I may have used, he looked around. My quirk. She arched her brow as her eyes roamed his body. And you're still standing? Well, he said, scratching the back of his head. I just used it for a second. Nana grinned. That's fantastic. I'm amazed you're even moving. What did it feel like? Like I was going to die. Nana laughed. Yeah, that sounds about right. I've been thinking about what you said. About focusing on using my quirk on a specific part of the body. Like throwing a punch and activating it at the moment of impact? Asked Nana. Yes, but only in my fist. Nana frowned. I don't think that's possible. It's kind of an all or nothing thing. He didn't think that was true. There had to be some amount of control with it, otherwise All Might would be busting down doors and destroying streets by just walking around in his muscle form. Flexing his fist, Izuku thought about the feeling that coursed through his body when he activated One for All. It was definitely all over his body, but it seemed to originate from his core. If he could focus the flow, or perhaps cut off the flow to certain parts of his body. Pain shot through his hand as he focused on just pumping One for All to it. As soon as he felt it, he shut off his quirk. The skin was already inflamed, but nothing felt broken as he massaged the tender area with his other hand. He glanced up, then shrunk back as he saw Nana staring wide-eyed at him with her jaw on the floor. Did you just use One for All? Thankfully no one was around to hear her. For less than a second. I wanted to see if I could. This is why I told you to wait for recovery, girl, she said angrily. She smacked his good hand away to examine his bruises. Well, it doesn't look that bad. If I had moved it or held it for longer, it would have been worse, said Izuku. Or maybe you're unconsciously holding back, said Nana. For just that second, did it feel as strong as when you punched the 0-pointer? He hadn't been thinking about how it felt when he used One for All for the first time. He was just focused on saving that girl. Trying harder to think about it, his mind just kept switching to a memory of him flying through a city. It didn't look like the one they'd used for the exam. Some type of dream he once had? I'm not sure. When I first used it, I felt tingly? Like a rush of power. An egg in a microwave. Her eyebrows bunched together. An egg in a microwave? Izuku blushed as he stammered out, like my B-body could crack at any second from the H-heat. To his surprise, she nodded. Yes, I understand. Really? You felt that too? Not at all, she replied. He felt his heart sink. Nana sat down next to him on the bench. But I can see the analogy. If you're able to visualize things like that mentally, then we can move forward in our training. Once we get through a little conditioning first. Nana nodded. We're in this together, Midoriya. I need to figure out how to wield this power just like you. With a wide grin, she held out her fist. Let's get way stronger, okay? Their letters came at the start of the new week. She could hear Midoriya crying in his room as he listened to the projection disc, but she hadn't even opened her letter yet. Nana didn't know why she was so nervous. In her old life, she'd already become a hero. Maybe not the best hero, but that was on purpose. If All for One had found her before she passed on One for All too. Toshinori. After ripping open the letter, she set the projection disc onto her desk and turned it on. A small screen made of light blipped into view. It showed the UA logo before switching to Principal Nizu's office. The mouse, bear, thing waved at the camera before sitting back in his chair. Nana felt a cold sweat drip down her back. What if she'd failed her test because she hadn't used One for All? What if Midoriya's tears weren't happy tears, but tears of anguish? Am I a dog? A mouse? A bear? I'm the principal of UA High School, Nizu, exclaimed the strange creature, raising his paws into the air. But you know that already, Nana. So let me get right into things. Nana leaned forward. Nizu cleared his throat. We almost failed you. Not only did you not properly demonstrate your quirk, but you completely failed the modern history section of the written exam. She wasn't too surprised by that. All she'd had to go off was what she could remember seeing through Toshinori's eyes. It wasn't like either her or him were paying attention to every event that happened around them. But she hung on to the word, almost, as it meant she had passed and would be going to UA. Would she be in Midoriya's class? Both of them hadn't done great. The rest of the exam you did as expected. And considering that you were born the day before, Perhaps I should be giving you high praise for passing it all. His eyes lost the twinkle they had at the start of the video. Instead, I'm very disappointed. What was I supposed to do, break my arms like him? Nana asked the video. She knew it couldn't hear her, but the words still spilled out. You've been given a second chance at life, but you'll be starting from the bottom. Out of all the students attending UA, I will be watching you the closest. Nizu stood up from his desk and started pacing around the room, the video camera following his movement. You were a pro-hero, he said with a hint of venom in his voice. And yet when faced with adversity and a challenge, you backed down. Nizu looked directly into the camera. If it were strictly up to me based on what I saw, I would have failed you. He took a deep breath. But it wasn't just up to me. Several teachers saw potential in you. And no, All Might was not a part of the judges' panel. The video feed switched to a man with a blocky face made of concrete. Cementos, Nana remembered from her time inside All Might's head. He was sitting inside a messy room filled with desks overflowing with paperwork. Probably the teacher's lounge, she guessed. If she shares a quirk with that other Midoriya kid, then I can understand why she didn't use it. Her restraint is there, she just needs to focus on control. Then it switched to a woman with dark purple hair and red glasses. The R-rated hero, Midnight. Instead of her usual costume, she was dressed in a white sweater. Nana Midoriya possesses an intuition for heroic dilemmas unseen in any other student. The potential for her power makes me shiver in excitement for what the future holds for that girl. Midnight liked her lips, then glanced at something off-screen. What do you think, Eraserhead? Instead of switching to another person, it turned to the corner of the room where there was a yellow sleeping bag set against the wall. Nana couldn't tell if there was a person inside, as the opening was facing away from the camera. A tired, rough voice said, she didn't rely on her quirk. Is that all you noticed? Asked Midnight. The voice sighed. Without her quirk she still achieved satisfactory results in the practical, and she showed some intellect in the written exam. So you can see she has potential. The sleeping bag shifted. Everyone does, just as everyone can fail to live up to expectations. The video feed returned to Nizu in his office. So, as you can see, we are eager to see what you can do with the proper tutelage, myself included. You might also have noticed Midnight refer to you as Nana Midoriya. That was not a mistake. Once Inko finishes her half of the adoption papers, that will become your new name. Please apologize to her on my behalf for ruining the surprise. I look forward to seeing what you can accomplish, Ms. Midoriya, in your future at UA High School. Go beyond, plus ultra. Nana turned off the disc and sat at her desk. Once again she was just good enough. Only succeeding because others saw something in her. Didn't Nizu understand? He'd seen the power of one for all. She'd done her best. Wasn't it good enough? Tears fell down her cheeks. Victory wasn't supposed to feel so hollow. When would she ever be good enough? The Midoriya twins, that was what the teachers at UA had started to call his former master and his new pupil. His new students. Toshinori could see them waiting for him on the beach, just as he asked, but he was still waiting and watching them from around the corner. Izuku's first use of one for all had caused quite a stir amongst the staff, especially with the knowledge that there was another student with that kind of power. Everyone was eager to see what they could do with more control. So he'd spent every free second of his time trying to figure out that problem. Toshinori had never struggled with controlling one for all. It seemed to have been tailor-made for his body. The most pain it had ever caused him was when he went over his time limit. If Nana had ever struggled, she never told him. Young Midoriya looked his way. All Might. Toshinori ran over with surprising speed and shushed the boy. Not in public. Sorry, said Midoriya, covering his mouth as he blanched. Nana laughed. The sweet sound reminding Toshinori of the past. Worse times than now, but at least she had been there. No one's going to think the number one hero is a skeleton in his downtime, relax. I'd rather not risk my position, said Toshinori. He looked around, but the beach was mostly clear. The closest group were playing music too loud to hear what they were saying. Breathing a sigh of relief, Toshinori looked down at his new students. Another strange development in his life, as he'd always had to look up to Nana. She was rarely on the ground. Congratulations. He high-fived both of them. I'm proud of you for passing. Young Midoriya cried tears of joy, as expected, but Nana seemed to shrink into herself. She crossed her arms and took a minuscule step back. Thank you, she muttered. I want you both to know that I had no hand in your acceptance. Though I did give my recommendation on your behalf, Nana. We won't let you down, said Midoriya, confidently. Toshinori smiled. Good. I'll be teaching both of you at UA, so I expect to see you giving it your all. Again, another minuscule step back from Nana. Did his breath stink? Have you been keeping up with your training, young Midoriya? We've been working on controlling one for all, said the boy. That's great, exclaimed Toshinori. It was like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. How has that been? I can hold it for half a second, and Nana can hold it for a second, young Midoriya answered. He rubbed his neck. But W can't move. I see. Perhaps it was karma. He had it easy, so now it would be next to impossible for him to teach the next generation. So that's your limit without hurting yourselves? No, we still get bruises and mild swelling from activating it for that long, said Nana. We haven't tried for longer because we're worried we'll break something. And how did you two get this far? My current method is to imagine an egg in a microwave with an on-off switch, said Midoriya. Toshinori snickered. That's so stupid, he muttered. But whatever works for you, he said much louder. Honestly, it was the perfect metaphor for the technique that he'd been planning on introducing to them. All right, in that case, why don't you put the egg in and turn down the heat? Nana tilted her head at her former apprentice, but young Midoriya's eyes lit up. I was curious if it was like a spectrum. What are you talking about? Asked Nana. We've been using our quirk like it only has 2 modes, on and off, but quirks are flexible. We just need to figure out how to only use a portion of that strength. Young Midoriya mumbled to himself for a few seconds before snapping out of it. What do you do when you're in your muscle form? Like when you use something small like a doorknob, he asked Toshinori. Well, I just do it. I don't really think about it. Nana snapped her fingers. What if we treated our quirk like a muscle? She pretended to be holding something delicate. Your muscles aren't flexed all the time, but Nana clapped her hands together. You can either flex them all at once or build up to it gradually, modulating the heat so the egg doesn't crack or boil, muttered young Midoriya. Toshinori chuckled, blood gushing out of his throat. Whatever works for the both of you. He wiped his mouth and said, either way, we'll spend this next few weeks until school starts working on your control and building up your bodies to handle the power. Boosting himself up to his muscle form, All Might proclaimed, I will make the 2 of you into heroes. Hey, is that All Might? Yeah, I think it is. Toshinori groaned. I will help you both later. For now, I am running from my fans. Oh, the 2 of you look just precious. Nana adjusted her tie, and used to wearing such formal wear once more. Even in her old life she'd avoid anything that needed to be buttoned. Adding a tie was just torture. Glancing at her brother, she could see that Izuku was having just as little fun as she was. Or he was just nervous. She looked down at her skirt and frowned, glad that she was able to wear tights. Skin-tight suits were one thing, but a skirt was just too lewd for her tastes. Now, are you sure neither of you are forgetting anything? Asked Inko, snapping another picture. No, Mom, we're fine, said Izuku. He shot her an apologetic look. You've got your school books? Notebooks? Pencils? Tissues? Did you get your handkerchief, Izuku? I made sure to iron it. Oh, do you have plenty of tampons, Nana? She blushed furiously. Can we go now? Nana didn't even bother to look at Izuku. The low groan he was making was evidence enough how he felt. Sorry, Tears welled in Inko's eyes as she enveloped them both in a hug. I'm so proud of you. She squeezed a little tighter. Both of you. Thanks, Mom, said Izuku. Thanks, replied Nana. It didn't feel right masquerading as a 15-year-old, even if that was what she appeared to be on the surface. Inko was around the same age she had been when she died. So it felt odd to be pampered by her with shopping trips, home-cooked meals, and plenty of affirmations of love when Nana knew her only purpose in this second life was to prepare Izuku Midoriya for the fight against All for One. Should he find a way to come back from the dead like she had? Nana and Izuku didn't talk much on the way to school. She confirmed that he hadn't trained the night before. Being tired on the first day of school was no good, then let him stew in his nerves. While he was nervous, she was annoyed. The last thing she wanted to do with her second life was spend it around children. And yet she knew this was where she was needed. They followed the small crowd of students onto UA's campus. It was huge, stretching for miles with most of the space taken up by fields of grass and scattered trees. Nana spotted a few students testing out their quirks under a nearby tree as they waited for class to start. When she turned back to Izuku, she found the boy shivering with excitement. "This is it," he muttered as he looked up at the main building. "You going to be all right?" she asked. He took a deep breath. "Yeah, it should be fine. I just have to hope I don't see Glasses Boy or Kakin." Nana smirked. "Hoping to see that girl you saved instead?" He jumped and sprinted into the building without answering. Nana laughed and followed him inside. Most of the hallways were empty, but there were a few students here and there. Mostly those in the upper years. Finally they reached the door to Class 1A. It loomed over them. Izuku hesitated at the door. "This is it," he muttered. Nana let the boy have his moment. He earned it. But after a minute of standing outside the door, she frowned and nudged Izuku in the side. "Come on, we're going to be late." "Right, sorry," he said as he pulled open the door. Immediately she was assaulted by loud yelling. "Remove your feet from the desk at once," yelled a kid with dark blue hair and glasses. He swung his arms up and down rapidly. "We are UA students now. We need to respect this institution and those who have come before us." The blonde-haired kid with red eyes he was yelling at just rubbed his heels into the desk and smirked. "Like IFING care about some shitty extras. There's only one person that matters at this school." He jerked his thumb into his chest. "Me." "Scandalous," exclaimed the kids with glasses. "Are you sure you're in the right department? Listen up, I'm going to be the next number one hero, so don't you forget." The blonde-haired boy trailed off as his eyes locked onto Izuku. "Deku," he growled. Nana glared right back at the boy. Following the pair of red eyes, the boy with the glasses glanced at them then jumped over. He extended his hand out to Izuku, rigid like it was made of stone. "Hello, my name is Tenya Ida." When Izuku didn't move, Ida took the boy's hands in his as he shook them firmly. "It's a pleasure to introduce myself properly. I am Izuku Midoriya." Ida bowed his head. "I apologize for my actions during the entrance exam. You clearly perceived the true nature of the test. It is an honor to share a homeroom with such an exemplary student." "Likewise," said Izuku. Standing up straight, Ida turned toward Nana. "Hello. My name is..." "Hello, Ida. I'm Nana Midoriya." The family name felt strange on her tongue. A pit formed in her stomach whenever she spoke it out loud, connected to herself. Like she was throwing away her old family. "Kotaro." The boy with red eyes arched his brow. "Who the hell?" "Oh, it's the plain-looking boy. And the nudist girl." "Nudist girl?" Nana turned around, smiling as she saw the brown-haired girl that gave her the jacket. "Hey, you're in this class too?" She nodded. "Up. It's just like Present Mike said. You both got in." Nana wasn't sure what the girl was talking about, but Izuku seemed to be following it. She reached around and pulled out the jacket the girl had lent her when she first returned to the land of the living. "I was hoping to see you around." The girl's eyes lit up. "My jacket? You remembered?" "Of course I did," said Nana. "I didn't get the chance to introduce myself before, so I'm Nana." She put her arm around Izuku and pulled him close. "And the guy who helped you in the exam is Izuku Midoriya, my brother." "What?" yelled the blonde-haired kid. "And I'm Tenya Ida. Achiko Uraraka." She bowed. "A pleasure to finally make your acquaintance." All four of them turned as they heard a loud explosion. "Don't ignore me." "Kakin," stammered Izuku. "You're going to get in trouble." "Shut up, Deku." He jammed his finger at Nana. Who the hell are you? Nana opened her mouth to give a nasty retort, but she was interrupted by a familiar tired voice saying, "If you're here to socialize, then you might as well leave." Another year, another class of hero hopefuls with no potential. He'd seen it enough times to have his technique down to perfection. At least they shut up as soon as they saw him. Pulling his juice pouch out of his sleeping bag, Shota let his eyes wander over the class. He slurped it, then stuffed the empty pouch back in his sleeping bag for later. Why did they always just stare at him? Every year. It was like they'd never been inside a school before. An adult shows up, you take your seat and get ready to listen to the lesson. Not that hard. Seeing that they were just going to stand there and stare at him, Shota unzipped his sleeping bag and stepped out of it. At least they'd finally stop talking. 8 seconds. That's how long you took to quiet down. This is the hero course. Shota scratched his messy beard. A villain isn't going to wait for you, so make sure you're ready ahead of time. At their blank stares, Shota sighed and added, "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa." Every year he had a few students that recognized him, mostly those that had older siblings or had seen him doing hero work. This year, only 2 eyes lit up with recognition, the Midoriya twins. Shota knew they weren't actually twins, but he wasn't sure what their exact relationship was. He'd seen the video of the girl appearing out of nowhere, naked as the day she was born, in front of the school. But she didn't have a teleportation quirk, or an invisibility quirk, and both were listed as having the same power quirk. Intriguing, but not enough to keep them in his class if they didn't hold any promise. He pulled out a set of gym clothes from his sleeping bag and waved them in the air. "Go put these on and head out to the grounds." Achiko Uraraka raised her hand. "Sir? What about orientation? Possible problem, child?" She was out of her seat, but she looked too innocent. Those types were easy to break down. "Heroes don't have time for that nonsense," said Shota. One of the few benefits of the job was getting to do whatever he wanted. Sure, he would have loved to sleep through the long entrance ceremony, but then he would have had to wait to test his students until the next day. Too wasteful. No one bothered to argue with him. Good, he thought. Those extra few seconds would be crucial since they had an extra student in the class. Once everyone was changed and had gathered in the training grounds, Shota explained his reasoning for the upcoming tests. 8 fitness tests, each targeting different physical attributes with plenty of room for creativity. There was some overlap, but overall it worked. He called Bakugo to throw the first softball, and stepped back to watch with the rest of his students. The boy was good, one of the best applicants they'd seen, but he was too violent. Shota raised an eyebrow as the boy screamed, "Die!" Excessive, but Bakugo made his point for him, so Shota wasn't going to call him out for it. Not yet anyway. After showing the kids Bakugo's new score, and explaining the stakes of the test's failure means expulsion, Shota sat back and watched his students work. There were the usual terrified looks and pleas for mercy, but a few looked whipped into action. At least none of them said their pants. Shota would never forgive Togata for that. The first event, the 50-meter dash, went as expected. Those with quirks that used their speed excelled, and the others just ran as fast as they could. Some were creative, like Aoyama using his beam to shoot him across, and Shoto sliding on his ice. No one did terribly, but no one blew him away. Then Izuku Midoriya stepped up with Bakugo. Shota got ready with a few eye drops. He wasn't sure when Midoriya would blow himself up, but he wanted to be prepared in case the kid was stupid enough to do so on the first test. No way in hell he was going to let someone like that stay in his class. Midoriya and Bakugo got into running poses, and then the robots set them off. As expected, Bakugo flew over the track with his explosions. The smoke from the explosions obscured the track, making it hard for Shota to see what Midoriya was doing. But he didn't have to wait long. Bakugo won the race, achieving an impressive time. Not as fast as the speedster, but still an improvement over his middle school time. Midoriya, on the other hand, crushed his time. There was no immediate sign that he was using his quirk. Had Shota not been looking for it, he would have just assumed that Midoriya was just more fit. But no, Midoriya had used his quirk. Then the smoke and dust cleared. His side of the track was littered with holes, each one an equal distance from the other. It was like each step he took he dug himself into the ground. Shota wondered if the boy didn't just have a strength-increasing quirk, but the results of the entrance exam made it clear to see the kid had power. Far too much power. So if he'd used his quirk, why wasn't he bleeding out on the ground? He was so curious he couldn't stop himself from calling Midoriya over. "Yes, sensei? What happened there?" "Oh," said Midoriya sadly. "Well, Kaken's explosions threw me off, so I got a late start." "I meant with your quirk," said Shota. "My quirk?" asked Midoriya. His eyes lit up and he exclaimed, "My quirk? Well, I used the lowest percentage of my power in each leg, turning it off and on as I ran." "On each leg? With every step? To make those split-second decisions?" Even Shota's quirk required some concentration to activate it. He'd never thought about flipping it on and off in the middle of a battle to confuse an enemy, until now. "Yes, sensei." "Are you hurt?" Midoriya chewed his lip as he looked down at his feet. "A little sore, but I should be fine." "Why didn't you do that during the entrance exam?" asked Shota. Maybe the kid had just wanted to show off at the time. "I, didn't know how. My quirk developed late, you see. So I haven't had a lot of practice with it." "So in the couple of weeks since the exam you went from blowing yourself up to that?" asked Shota, gesturing to the race track. "Nana helped me a lot," said Midoriya, smiling nervously. Maybe this class wouldn't be as bad as Shota thought. Nana had to admit, Izuku was much better at adjusting to the increased power of One for All than she was. On the flip side, her more conditioned body was better able to handle the power for longer. While he had to balance how long he could turn One for All on, she could turn it on and go, but it made her stiff as her muscles locked up from the pain. So, unlike Izuku, she wasn't able to use it for the 50-meter dash, but she could use it during the grip test. She scored much higher than her brother, but not the highest in the class. Standing long jump, yes, sidestepping no. It was frustrating, especially as she knew it was possible to use it like Izuku, but her brain just didn't work like his. If it had, maybe she could have beaten All for One in her time, and not left her friends to pick up the struggle after her. Next up was the throwing event. Nana decided it was time to show off a little. In the weeks leading up to the first day of school, both of them worked themselves to the bone to get to the point where they could use barely 1% of One for All without causing serious injury. She'd had a much easier time of it than Izuku, even if what she could do came at the cost of her mobility. In this event that didn't matter. Power surged through her body like a bright, burning flame. Nana pulled back her arm and, "Do it without your quirk first," said Aizawa. The softball fell out of her hand. It landed on the pitch with a soft thud as she angrily turned to her teacher. "What? Isn't the point of this to test our limits?" "It's also to show growth," he replied. Aizawa tapped his clipboard. "You're the only student here that doesn't have their middle school scores listed." He gestured to a kid with red and white hair, Todoroki. She thought his name was. Even those who received more private education provided the school with their scores. "I don't know why I have your brother's and not yours, but I don't care. Do it without your quirk first." Huffing, Nana picked up the ball and tried again. This time, she just threw it normally. It went farther than those who didn't have strength-enhancing quirks, but nothing impressive. Aizawa marked down the score, then tossed her another ball. As she stretched her arm out before throwing, she watched Aizawa out of the corner of her eye. He was one of the teachers who had made a comment in her acceptance video. One of the few that agreed she had potential and was worth giving a chance. Of course, she didn't know who he was at the time, but after asking Izuku about him, she learned a lot more than she needed to about the pro-hero Eraserhead. All she cared about was his quirk, as it could erase any quirk, provided that it wasn't a mutant-type quirk. Nana was only in this world thanks to Izuku's latent quirk. They had no idea how it worked, or whether the effects were temporary. If he chose to use his quirk on her, would she disappear? Did her body count as a mutant-type quirk? "Anytime, Midoriya," said Aizawa as he rubbed his eyes. She gulped. Best not to test him. All her classmates were watching her curiously. Well, most of them were curious. Izuku was doing his best to give her a comforting smile, but his nervous shivering just made it look ridiculous. Bakugo was glaring at her like she'd called his mother ugly. which, based on the pictures Inko had shown her of shared family trips with the Bakugo family, his mother was anything but that. Pulling her arm back, she charged up one for all. Just 5%. That was all she could use. It would leave a nasty bruise, but she felt she could handle it throughout the rest of the tests. There was a loud rush of wind as she flung the softball as far as she could. Within seconds it had disappeared into the horizon. Her classmates stared at her with awe, but she was too focused on cradling her arm. Nothing was broken, but it hurt a lot more than she expected. Aizawa said her score, but she wasn't listening. There was a loud ringing in her ears. Nana moved back to Izuku's side. Whatever he was saying she couldn't hear. She focused on taking deep breaths to try and let the pain pass. Finally, her pulse settled down and her ears returned to normal. Just in time for a blonde a-hole to stomp over. "This is the last time I'll ask this. Who the hell are you?" asked Bakugo. "She's my sister," said Izuku. "You don't have a sister, Deku," said Bakugo. "He does now. So why don't you just mind your own business," said Nana. He growled, small explosions flaring off his hands. "So what? He just suddenly gets a quirk and a sister that has the same quirk? I don't buy it." Nana stood up to her full height, standing over Bakugo by a few inches. "I didn't ask what your opinion was. Now walk away." Bakugo smirked. "You want to fight? I don't care how strong your quirk is. Just ask your brother how good I am." "Try me," said Nana, feeling the power of one for all course through her veins. Then the feeling suddenly disappeared. White ropes that looked like the kind of bandages you'd find on a mummy wrapped around Bakugo just before he could get any closer. Nana chuckled, but then felt those same ropes bind her as well. Both of them were pulled away from each other as Aizawa slowly walked over. His long hair was defying gravity, red eyes glowing as he glared at them. "Enough. Stop interrupting my class. Izuku Midoriya, go take your turn." "Sorry," yelled Izuku as he ran over to the pitch. Aizawa hadn't yet let them go, so Nana felt free to ignore Bakugo and watch Izuku. She expected him to do good, but not as good as her. Not only was he less athletic, he also lacked the durability needed to use as much of one for all as she had. Unless he chose to injure himself, which she had warned him was not allowed. They'd already had to miss 3 days of training last week when he threw out his arm using too much strength. His excuse? It was their last set and he wanted to push himself. The boy had no self-preservation. Though it wasn't like she was any better. She still felt a stinging sensation in her arm. Izuku took a deep breath. A faint glow surrounded his legs for a second before starting to move through his body. It started at his legs, moved through to his waist, up his back muscles, turned down his arm, and then finally finished at his fingertips as he threw the ball. "Smash!" he yelled. While Nana had created a burst of wind, Izuku's was like a thunderclap. She was physically pushed back by the sheer force of it. Her hair whipped around her as her eyes widened. There was no way that was 1% or even 5%. Squinting, she tried to peer through the dust cloud he'd kicked up. Nana hoped he hadn't blown up his arm again. To her surprise, he was still standing, but the tips of his fingers were swollen and bright red. "I did it," said Izuku, rubbing his fingertips. This boy was going to be a monster. Oh. Izuku watched his classmates take their turn throwing as Nana helped him rub ointment into his fingers. It was a special brand of ointment that helped with swelling and bruises, a Recovery Girl product. While it helped with healing, it did very little for his pain. He didn't mind. What was most important was that he hadn't broken any bones. "Are you okay, Midoriyas?" He turned to his left, expecting to see the kind, brown-haired girl, Uraraka, but it was a much different girl. One which he could completely see through, save for her UA-branded gym clothes. Toru Hagakure. Izuku's face turned red-hot as he realized how close she was standing, quickly turning away. At least he didn't have to meet her eyes to talk to her. But where to look? Her body may be invisible, but her clothes outlined it pretty well. "Midoriyas?" asked Nana. "Well, yeah," said Hagakure, ping her hip as she crossed her arms. "You're siblings, right? I noticed you both messed up your arms." "Thank you, but I'm fine," said Nana with a bright smile. She was so much better at that than he was. Case in point, Izuku's lip wobbled as he stammered out, me too. Hagakure giggled. If you say so. She sat down on the ground next to them. I just had to see if my kindred spirit was okay. Kindred spirit? Asked Izuku. She had an invisibility quirk, not a power quirk like they had. Nor did she seem like them in personality, although this was the first time Izuku had met her. Well, more your sister than you. As far as I know, said Hagakure, leaning back on invisible arms. How so? Asked Nana. Because we can both appreciate the wind through our loins, said Hagakure with a dreamy sigh. I'm not a nudist, said Nana through gritted teeth, blushing furiously. Don't worry, I won't tell, said Hagakure. She giggled as she sprang to her feet. Whoops, time for the next event. Nana buried her face in her hands as Hagakure skipped away. Izuku reached over and gave his sister a pat on the back. It's not your fault. Just my luck to get stuck with a rumor like that on the first day, said Nana. At least Kaken isn't giving you any more trouble. He hasn't stopped glaring at me since Aizawa pulled us apart, said Nana, pointing at the blonde bomber who was indeed staring at her with a look that could melt steel. Would you believe me if I said that's him on his best behavior? Sadly, I would. The rest of the events went okay for Izuku. He was still in pain from overexerting himself during the ball throw, but he stomached through it and finished strong. After the final event, Mr. Aizawa called everyone together and showed the final rankings. He got 5th with Ida just barely beating him for 4th, while Nana got 7th behind Tokoyami, a boy with a bird head that controlled his shadow. Nana had an amused look on her face when she saw her ranking, but refused to tell Izuku what she found so funny. Yaoyorozu, a girl with black hair whose body was way too developed, got 1st. Her creation quirk was simply amazing, versatile and strong. Todoroki, no doubt related to Enji Todoroki the flame hero, Endeavor, got 2nd. Izuku was a little confused when he heard his classmate's name and saw ice instead of fire but couldn't find the courage to ask about it. Kaken got 3rd, which shocked Izuku to his core. He expected Kaken to easily get 1st. Not only that, but the distance between their scores wasn't that large. Now all he had to do was close the gap. In last place was a boy with sticky purple ball for hair named Mineta, and just barely beating him was Hagakure. The poor boy was kneeling on the ground, tears and snot draining from his face like a waterfall as he pounded the dirt. Izuku felt bad for him. In another life, that might have been him on the bottom. Especially if he didn't have Nana helping him. Also, I lied, said Mr. Aizawa as he gathered his supplies and stuffed them into his capture device. I'm not going to expel anyone. He gave the stunned class an evil grin. That was just a rational deception to bring out the best in you. Clean up. You'll find your curriculum in your desks. Yaoyorozu was the only one who didn't look surprised. It was obviously a lie. She led the pack back to the locker rooms as his classmates slowly came out of their stupor. If you feel like you overexerted yourself, go see. Recovery girl, said Mr. Aizawa as he walked away. See you all bright and early tomorrow. Izuku looked down at his fingers. Guess we should go, huh? Actually, I need to make a call first, said Nana. Why don't you go on ahead and I'll meet you at the gate? Are you sure? That bruise on your arm doesn't look good. She flashed him a bright smile. Positive. It'll take a lot more to take me down. Well, all right. With one final wave, Izuku raced after his classmates to ask them about their quirks. Just as soon as he found the courage. I made it through the first day. Thank you for your advice, Sorahiko. Nana was leaning against a tree not too far from the training grounds. She watched a group of ants work on cleaning up their ant hill as she spoke with her oldest friend. When Inko had gotten Nana a phone as a reward for getting into UA, she wasn't really sure what to do with it. Then she remembered she could bother Sorahiko. Even as much as things had changed, some things were still the same. He grunted. So, you got 1st in Eraserhead's little test? 7th. Fitting, huh? Very funny. I'm guessing it was because you were too stiff? I told you that you needed to stretch more, said Sorahiko. She could hear him microwaving something in the background. I'll keep that in mind. What about the boy? Nana glanced at the pitch. He did much better than I thought, but he still hurt himself. That won't be a problem soon enough. He learns quickly. That will aid him a lot in the future. Just keep an eye on him so he doesn't act too rash. Like you did for me? She asked playfully. And Toshinori. I attribute all of my gray hairs to the both of you, Sorahiko said with just a hint of amusement. Most people wouldn't have recognized it, but Nana knew him well enough that she could read him like an open book. I wonder how his first lesson will go. Terrible, said Sorahiko. He hasn't called me once for advice. Why don't you call him? Asked Nana. I'm retired. There was a brief pause. I'm glad you're back, Nana. The microwave dinged. Nana laughed. Me too. I'll talk to you later. I can keep talking. Not with your mouth full. Can't have you choking when I'm too far away to save you. Enjoy your lunch. I gotta go see Chio and then meet up with Izuku. Sorahiko chuckled. Alright, talk to you later. Goodbye, Nana. Tears welled in her eyes each time she heard those words. Goodbye, Sorahiko. Talk to you soon.